The wind moaned across the dry plains like a wounded animal. Dust rose from the cracked earth, swirling in low, lazy spirals. Somewhere, far off, a hawk cried out, a lonely echo lost in the vast emptiness of the American frontier. She was just a speck at first, barely visible against the baked horizon. A girl, no taller than a saddle, barefoot and limping, her dress torn and fluttering in the breeze. Strands of her matted blonde hair clung to her dirt-smeared face, but she didn't cry. Not anymore. Not since the day before yesterday. Or was it the day before that? Her name was Clara. 7 years old. A face too young for such stillness. She clutched a worn satchel that dangled at her side like a memory. Each step she took across the dry path was a defiance of gravity, of grief, of everything that had tried to pull her down since the morning her mama went cold and silent beneath that twisted juniper tree. She walked until the sun was a dying ember behind her, casting long shadows across the ground. Then she saw it. A cabin. Wood, slanted and weather-beaten, leaning slightly to the east, like it was too tired to stand straight. Smoke curled from the chimney in a hesitant wisp. She stopped at the fence, eyes wide, heart thudding in her ears. A man stepped out of the barn, tall and sun-browned, with a limp in his right leg and a shotgun slung across his shoulder. His face was hard, worn by time and war and years of silence, but something in his eyes wasn't yet dead. Clara gripped the fence post and tried to sound braver than she felt. "My mama died, sir," she said. "Can I clean your house?" The man didn't speak. He studied her like he wasn't sure if she was real. The silence stretched between them until Clara thought he might send her away. Instead, he crouched slowly, wincing as his knee cracked. "Hug me," he said. She didn't move at first. Then, with cautious steps, she crossed the yard, climbed the porch, and fell into his arms. He wrapped her in a hug that was rough but warm, hands calloused and trembling slightly. She didn't cry, but something in her softened. He carried her inside, not saying a word. The cabin was small, one room and a loft above, with a hearth that gave off just enough warmth to sting the chill from her skin. There was a rocking chair in one corner, a rifle hanging above the mantel, and a picture frame resting on a side table. Its glass cracked, the woman inside smiling with haunted eyes. He set her gently on the cot near the fire and laid a wool blanket over her shoulders. She watched him from beneath the folds, her body still, eyes flickering like candlelight. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Clara." He gave a single nod. "Tom." She nodded back. He fed her stew, thin but hot. She ate quietly, eyes never leaving his face, as if memorizing it. When the bowl was empty, she set it down with care, her small fingers trembling. "She got bit," Clara whispered. "A snake. We was walking near the creek. I ran to get help, but there wasn't no one." Tom leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring into the fire. He didn't ask questions. He just let her speak. "She told me to find you. Said you was a good man. Said you'd know what to do." He blinked slowly. The flames danced in his eyes. "She knew me?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Said you helped her once? Long time ago. Before I was born." Tom didn't answer right away. He rubbed his thumb over his knuckles. Then he stood, walked to the mantel, and lifted down the cracked frame. He stared at it a long moment, then turned it to face her. "Was this her?" Clara stared at the photo. "That's her," when she smiled more. Tom's eyes closed. He placed the picture back. The next morning, the sky hung low and grey. Tom saddled his horse and set Clara on a stool beside the fire. "I'll be back by sundown," he said. "Stay inside, don't open the door." She nodded, small hands folded in her lap. He rode out toward the juniper tree. The spot wasn't hard to find. A twisted limb still held the remnants of Clara's makeshift campfire. The ground was freshly disturbed. He knelt, dug a grave with his hands, slowly, silently. When he was done, he marked the spot with a wooden cross. "Annabel," he said, voice breaking on her name. "I remember you." By the time he returned, Clara was asleep, curled like a kitten beneath the blanket. He didn't wake her. Over the next days, he showed her the rhythms of ranch life. How to feed the chickens, how to carry water from the well, how to sweep the porch so the dust wouldn't cling to your lungs. She never asked for toys or sweets, never whined or cried. She listened, learned fast. One morning, while milking the cow, she looked up at him and asked, "You ever had a daughter?" "No," Tom said. "Once thought I might. But—" He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Clara didn't press. She just nodded and kept working. That afternoon, clouds rolled in thick and heavy. The sky turned black like someone had spilled ink across it. The wind changed, colder now, restless. Tom hurried to secure the barn. Clara helped without needing to be asked, carrying tools, holding nails between her teeth as he climbed to patch a leak in the roof. Then came the lightning. Blinding flashes, cracking through the sky like the heavens were splitting open. The wind howled and ripped at their clothes. Rain pelted them sideways. Tom shouted down to her, "Get inside!" But she shook her head and held fast to the ladder, bracing it as he hammered the last board into place. The storm raged around them, but she didn't flinch. Later, soaked and shivering, they sat by the fire. He handed her a dry shirt, far too big, but she wrapped herself in it and smiled slightly. "You're tough," he said. "Mama said being tough don't mean not being scared. Just means you keep going." He nodded, staring at her, for a long moment. That night Tom dreamt of war. Gunfire in the hills, screams echoing down corridors of smoke. His wife's face appeared pale and bloodied, asking why he didn't come sooner. He woke with a start, drenched in sweat. He walked outside, needing air. Found Clara sitting on the porch, legs dangling off the edge, her blanket around her shoulders. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Mama used to sing me a song. I tried to remember the words, but I can't." Tom sat beside her. They looked out at the dark. "She used to sing too," he said quietly. "My wife, Lizzie, died in the cholera outbreak." Clara reached over and held his hand, just for a moment. In the following days, Clara began to hum softly when she worked, melodies without words. Tom didn't interrupt. He listened, as if maybe, somewhere in those tunes, a piece of his old life still echoed. One morning, while repairing the chicken coop, Tom spotted a figure in the distance, watching from the tree line. A silhouette. Gone the moment he looked twice. He said nothing to Clara. The land was quiet again. Almost too quiet. One afternoon, Clara caught her finger on a rusted nail. It bled more than it should. She cried then, not loudly, but the kind of cry that came from everything else bubbling to the surface. Tom wrapped the finger in cloth, crouched before her and said, "It's all right to feel it." She blinked at him. "The pain, the missing. You don't have to carry it all alone." Her lower lip trembled. "If I stop, I think I'll fall apart." He nodded. "Then fall apart here. This is a good place for it." She leaned against him and let the tears come, silent and shaking. That night, Tom lit 2 candles, one for Annabel, one for Lizzie. When Clara asked why, he said, "So they can find their way, wherever they are." As the flames flickered, casting soft shadows against the cabin walls, Clara took Tom's hand. "Do you think they're friends now?" she asked. "I think," he said, They're watching. The fire crackled. Outside, the night held its breath. Inside, the little stranger had become something else. Not a burden, not a guest. A promise. And though neither of them said it, something had begun to stitch itself back together. Slow, fragile, but real. Something worth protecting. Something worth fighting for. Something that wouldn't be lost again. The first snow came early that year, creeping in like a whisper rather than a roar. One morning, Clara opened the door and found the world white and still, the landscape reshaped in silence. She stood there barefoot, breath turning to clouds, watching flakes drift from a pewter sky. For a moment, the world seemed peaceful. Then Tom stepped in behind her, placed a heavy hand on her shoulder, and gently closed the door. "Get your boots," he said. "I don't have any," she replied, eyes lowered. Tom looked down at her raw red feet. He frowned but didn't say a word. Instead, he grabbed an old hide from the closet, laid it flat on the table, and began cutting. His hands were slow but sure, the movements worn from years of repetition. Clara watched in silence as he stitched and tied, fingers clumsy but determined. 2 hours later, she had moccasins, rough, mismatched, but warm. She slipped them on and smiled faintly. "They feel like rabbit's feet." Tom grunted, the closest he came to a laugh. Life changed under the snow. Chores grew harder, days shorter. Water had to be broken from the creek with a pickaxe. Firewood was gold. Clara bundled in layers of wool and fur, often twice her size, and shuffled through the snow like a walking coat. Yet she never complained. Tom taught her how to read the sky, how to tell when a storm was bluffing and when it was coming for real. She was quick to learn, curious without being foolish. Most days, he let her do more than any child ought to, but he had learned painfully that the world did not wait for childhood to pass. It consumed eyes, innocence like dry grass in a blaze. One morning, Tom went out to check the traps they'd set along the tree line. When he returned, Clara was perched on the fence, cradling a rabbit in her arms. Her eyes were soft and her lips pressed tight. "I didn't want it to die scared," she said as he approached. He looked at the animal. It was young, bleeding, its body trembling. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. Clara nodded and turned away as he ended the suffering with a swift, practiced hand. That night, they roasted the rabbit over the fire. Clara didn't eat much, but she sat closer to Tom than usual, her shoulder brushing his. As the days passed, the snow deepened, and so did the silence. But something about the quiet between them had shifted. It no longer felt empty. It felt full, full of things neither could name, but both understood. One evening, Tom awoke in a cold sweat. The dream had returned. Mud, screaming, the smell of gunpowder and blood. He staggered outside, needing to breathe, to remind himself where and when he was. The moon hung low, casting the snow in shades of blue and grey. Clara sat on the porch, knees tucked under her chin. "You too?" she asked. Tom nodded. He sat beside her, silence stretching like the plains beyond. "Was it war?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "I dream about Mama sometimes. But in the dream, she don't talk. She just looks at me, like she's trying to say something but can't." Tom rubbed a hand over his face. "Sometimes the dead leave unfinished things behind, and sometimes we carry them for too long." Clara looked at him, then leaned her head against his arm. "Maybe if we carry it together, It won't be as heavy. He didn't speak, but his hand came to rest gently on her back. 3 days later, Tom found tracks circling the property. Not animal, boots. They hadn't heat, not anyone approach. No voices, no warnings. Just the quiet proof that someone had come and gone, watching. He said nothing to Clara at first. Just sharpened his knives, cleaned the rifle, and boarded up the window on the north wall. That evening, he gave Clara a small blade, sharp, bone-handled, and light enough for her to hold steady. "You keep it on you," he said, "always." She nodded once, without asking why. A few days later, the intruders returned, this time not in secret. Tom heard the hooves before he saw them. 4 riders, coats heavy, eyes hidden under wide-brimmed hats. The lead man wore a leather duster and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, looky here," he drawled, dismounting. "A little patch of heaven in the cold." Tom stood on the porch, rifle slung low but ready. Clara remained inside, hidden behind the curtains. "We're looking for food," the man continued. "Shelter, maybe a little company." "You're not getting any of it here," Tom replied, voice like gravel. The man laughed. "Now that ain't hospitable. Place like this, a man should learn to share." He looked toward the window, eyes catching movement. His grin deepened. "You got a helper in there?" he asked. "Cute thing. Hope she ain't too shy." Tom's jaw tensed. "You got till I count to 3. The man raised both hands mockingly. All right. We're leaving. For now." He turned to mount his horse. "But we'll be back, soon as the storm clears. Best have something worth offering." They rode off without firing a shot, but the message was clear. Inside, Tom closed the door with more force than needed. Clara stood nearby, pale but composed. "They're coming back, aren't they?" she asked. "Yes." "Will we be ready?" Tom looked down at her. "We will." They spent the next days preparing. Tom set traps, pitfalls, trip lines, snares laced with nails. He gave Clara more shooting lessons, had her practice loading and reloading until her fingers blistered. She never once refused. "You ever kill anyone?" she asked one night, as they sat by the fire. Tom stared at the flames. "Too many." "Did it help?" "No," he said. "But sometimes it's the only way to stop more from dying." She didn't ask anything else. 2 mornings later, they found a gift on the porch. A deer. Skinned, cleaned, and wrapped in hide. No footprints in the snow. Just the offering. Tom stepped outside, scanning the tree line. He spotted him then, a figure half shrouded in snow and branches, standing utterly still. Tall, wrapped in furs, eyes dark and unreadable. A bow slung over one shoulder, a tomahawk at his hip. He didn't speak, just stared. Tom raised a hand in cautious acknowledgement. The man nodded once, then disappeared into the trees. Clara named him Eagle Eyes. She saw him once or twice after that, always from a distance, always alone. Once, she found a carved wooden owl left on the windowsill. She kept it under her pillow. Tom wasn't sure what to make of him, but he never discouraged Clara from watching the tree line. Some part of him, buried beneath layers of doubt and mistrust, felt safer knowing the man was out there. One afternoon, while checking traps, Tom heard a soft whistle behind him. He turned, rifle raised, and found Eagle Eyes standing at the edge of the woods. The man motioned, 2 fingers down, then 3 to the east. Tom followed the sign. He found new tracks. The bandits had been back, scouting again. When he returned, Clara was waiting on the porch. "Was it him?" she asked. "Yes." "Do you trust him?" Tom thought a moment. "Not yet." but I don't distrust him either. Clara nodded, as if that was good enough. That night, Eagle Eyes appeared by the fire. No words were exchanged. He simply approached, nodded once to Clara, and sat beside the flames. Tom watched him carefully. The man stared into the fire like it held ancient secrets. Eventually, Tom poured him coffee, Eagle Eyes, accepted, drank silently, then offered a pouch of dried herbs. Tom accepted the gift with a slow nod. Later, after the man had vanished into the trees, Clara whispered, "He lost someone too." Tom looked at her. "How do you know?" "The way he walks, like something's missing." Tom said nothing. He understood. Winter deepened. The storm outside mirrored the one building inside all of them. Grief, fear, memories clawing their way to the surface. One night, Clara stood by the window, staring into the dark. "If they come, and we can't stop them..." Tom rose from his chair. "We will stop them." "But if we don't," she said, turning to face him, "I want you to run." He looked at her, astonished. "You think I'd leave you?" "I think you lost too much already," she said. "And if I go, you don't have to carry it again." Tom walked over, knelt in front of her. "Clara, I didn't ask for you to come here. Didn't plan for you. But you're here, and I'm not losing you." She didn't cry, just leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. He held her there a long while. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the storm waited. The wind had changed. It carried a different kind of silence now, one that didn't feel like peace, but waiting. The snow had begun to thaw, bearing patches of earth like fresh wounds. The creek ran faster. The crows had returned. Tom felt it in his bones, in the ache behind his ribs, the one that never truly left. Trouble was near. He didn't tell Clara. She already knew. She moved with purpose that morning, checking the traps, feeding the chickens, sharpening the small knife she kept tied to her waist. She didn't smile. Not because she was afraid, but because she had grown into the kind of girl who understood when smiling had no place. She was no longer the little stranger who had come stumbling through the dust. She was something new now, hardened, but not lost. Tom watched her from the porch, cleaning his rifle with slow, methodical care. His hands no longer trembled. He had made peace with what might come. If it had to happen, let it happen out. On this ground, with her behind him. The sun was low when they came. 4 riders, same as before, but there was no talking this time. No false grins or smooth-tongued threats. They rode in like men with a plan, rifles out, jaws set. Their leader, Wade, still wore the leather duster, but his eyes had lost their playfulness. He looked hungry now, like a man at the edge of something desperate. Tom didn't speak. He raised the rifle and fired before Wade's boots touched the ground. The shot took one rider clean in the chest. The others scattered, shouting, firing wildly. Clara dropped to her stomach just as a bullet shattered the window beside her. Tom moved fast, reloading with practiced speed. He ducked behind the woodpile, scanning the tree line. One bandit had taken cover behind the barn. Another had circled around toward the creek. Wade remained near the fence, barking orders. The battle was sudden and close. Clara crawled toward the trapdoor that led to the root cellar. She didn't hide. She grabbed the bow Tom had shown her how to string, the one she had practiced with each day until her fingers bled. She notched an arrow and waited. Tom fired again. The shot grazed the rider near the barn, who screamed and went down, clutching his leg. The man near the creek opened fire. Bullets kicked up snow around Tom's boots. Then came the silence. Tom peeked over the edge of the woodpile. He saw Wade, crouched, watching, calculating. A whisper of movement behind the barn. Eagle Eyes. Silent as breath, he stepped out of the tree line, blade drawn. one fluid motion, and the wounded rider was still. Clara, still as stone, waited near the cabin. She saw the third bandit creeping toward the back door, rifle raised. She let the arrow fly. It struck him in the shoulder. He screamed, spinning around. Tom turned at the sound and fired his final shot. The man fell, face first, into the snow. Only Wade remained. He rose slowly, rifle discarded, hands raised, but his eyes remained dangerous. "Didn't think you had it in you, old man," he said, voice flat. Tom stepped forward, gun lowered but not relaxed. "Get off my land." Wade smirked. "Ain't your land. Ain't anybody's anymore. You're just pretending." "I'm not pretending," Tom said. "I'm protecting." Wade shifted slightly, eyes flicking toward the creek. Tom followed the glance too late. A fifth man, previously unseen, rushed from the shadows and tackled him. They crashed to the ground. The rifle skidded away. The fifth man drew a blade and raised it high. Then Eagle Eyes appeared again. No sound, no warning, just steel flashing. The fifth man dropped, a ragged cry gurgling from his throat. Tom scrambled to his feet, blood trickling from a gash on his temple. Wade turned to run, but Clara stood there, small and unshaken, holding Tom's revolver in both hands. She didn't speak, didn't threaten. She simply pointed it. Wade froze. Tom moved behind Clara, placed a hand on her shoulder, and gently lowered the barrel. "He's not worth it," he said. Wade's sneer returned. "You let me walk. I'll be back. I promise you that." Tom stepped forward. "No, you won't." Wade reached for something at his belt. Eagle Eyes fired. A single arrow, straight through the throat. Wade dropped. The silence returned, heavy and final. Snow fell again that night, soft and slow, the kind that blanketed pain without erasing it. Clara sat beside Tom on the porch, legs pulled up, hands wrapped around a cup of broth. "Will they come again?" she asked. "No," he said. "They won't." She looked at him, studied his face. "You okay?" He didn't answer right away. "I'm not sure what okay means anymore, but I'm still here." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "So am I." The cabin was damaged, windows shattered, walls splintered, blood stained the steps. Tom didn't try to fix it. Instead, he packed what he could and hitched up the mule. "Where are we going?" Clara asked. "Where new," he said. "Somewhere we can build without ghosts in the walls." She nodded, accepting. Eagle Eyes helped them gather supplies. When they were ready to leave, Clara hugged him. He stiffened at first, then knelt and placed something in her hand, a small feather wrapped in leather cord. She wore it around her neck from that day forward. They travelled for 3 days, over hills and through narrow valleys. Tom moved slowly, carefully. Clara didn't complain once. On the 4th morning, they found a clearing by the river. Tall trees surrounded the space. Game trails crossed nearby. The soil was rich. "This it?" Clara asked. Tom looked around. "This is it." They built slowly. He taught her how to raise walls, set beams, carve joints. She gathered stones, patched leaks, learned to start a fire with one strike. Each nail driven was a memory replaced. Each log raised was a piece of the past buried with care. They planted beans, kept chickens, even built a small smokehouse. And sometimes, when the light was just right, Clara would hum that old tune again, the one with no words. Tom never asked what it meant. He just listened. He added a second photo to the shelf beside the hearth. The first was of Lizzie. The second, taken by a travelling peddler, showed Clara and Tom in front of the new cabin, both unsmiling, but both alive. Some nights, Tom would sit on the porch and look out at the dark. The ghosts still came, but they no longer haunted him. They visited, and then they left. One morning, Clara walked out carrying a letter she'd written. She held it out to Tom. "What's this?" he asked. "It's for someone like me, in case they come looking." Tom opened it. The first line read, "If you lost everything, but you're still breathing, come find us. We got room." He folded it carefully, nodded once, and tucked it in his pocket. Later that day, Clara helped him cut lumber for a second room, not because they needed more space, but because they might someday, because home wasn't a place. It was people who stayed when it stormed. It was a hug offered to a stranger. It was a girl with dirt on her face and a knife at her side who never stopped believing in the better kind of men. And it was the man who changed, not through preaching or promises, but through the quiet courage of staying, building, protecting. Together, they waited for spring. And when it came softly, like her voice the first time she called him Pa. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you feel, remember, or hope, don't let it end here. Like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories that honor resilience, love, and the quiet strength that carries us through the storm. And tell us, what would you have done if Clara had knocked on your door?